So in the previous tutorial video, we'll show you a very important technique of using breakpoints and debugger to analyze your program in a very slow motion fashion. So please make sure you're comfortable with debugger and breakpoints before you go on with the new concept, because for now on, we're going to use the debugger to illustrate to you the various program behavior. Because our program will get more complicated, so we really have to use debugger to illustrate to you. Make sure you don't get lost. Please study the video in the previously if you still got trouble. Okay. So now we're going to introduce to you loops that will really make our basic programming complete. So now we learned about assignments, we learned about if statements. Now we're going to learn about loops, especially later on we'll show you complicated program where you combine everything together. It's going to be a very powerful technique for you to really make your program more and more interesting. Okay, let's now just do the simplest possible example for loops. And there are two kinds of loops, for loop and while loop. For this video, we'll do the for loop. Okay, so now we'll say right click on Lab 2 projects and let's say new, and then let's go for class. Okay, let's simply say for loop. Okay, and then we simply choose the main method over here and say finish. Okay, let me just introduce to you the syntax first, and then I will illustrate to you the idea in the iPad, and then we'll try to first of all we draw some flowchart to show you what the behavior should be understood, and then we'll use debugger to verify for you. Okay, so now for loop, basically you use, okay, let's say this. Let me just do a comment over here. You use a for loop when you want to repeat an action for a fixed number of times. Okay, over here. So here, what's really important is a fixed number, which means maybe you want to repeat, let's say, a print statements for 5 times. The fixed number here is 5. Or you know that you want to prompt the user for entering 5 numbers. In this case, 5 is also the fixed number, right? So whenever you know a fixed number and you want to repeat the action for this many number of times, and use a for loop. Okay, so now let me show you how you can write a for loop. So there's only a single keyword you have to know how to write. Okay, for loop is a keyword. And then you have a pair of parentheses over here. Okay, as soon as you have that, okay, so now you want to have 2 semicolons over here, which means there is a section over here, there's a second section over here, and there's a third section over here, which I'll show you, right? These sections, okay? So always you have to have 2 semicolons. Syntactically speaking, you just need to have 2 semicolons. And then, like a if statement, you can start with a open curly brackets, hit enter, and now this is the easiest syntax for the for loop. And everything just compile for now. Okay, so now we're gonna talk about what you should write over here, left hand side, the middle, and also the right hand side, and then what you can write over here. So this is the action to repeat. So inside the curly brackets over here, that's called the body of the for loop. So the for loop body is going to be repeated for as many times as you specify the for loop to repeat. And now these are the 3 parts we have to be careful. Okay, so now maybe write it out first, and then I'll show you. We can say maybe integer I is assigned to 1. Okay, and then I is less than or equal to, let's say, 3. Okay. And then here I can say I++. Remember what we said before about I++. It's simply a shorthand for I is assigned to I+1. Okay, it's very commonly used for loop. Okay, so this is the easiest one we can have. And then let's say every time we simply want to print out the value for I. Okay, system.out.println. I is and plus I. So this is the easiest for loop you can write in Java. Okay. You simply say, I want to repeat the print statements at line number 11 for as many times as is specified over here in the header of the loop. So this is called the header of the loop. Okay, let's execute the code over here, and I'll explain to you on iPad how to analyze the syntax for the for loop, and then we'll try to do something a little bit more complicated on the debugger. Okay. Now, let's simply just go back to Package Explorer over here, right-click on for loop, and then you can say run as Java application. And then you can simply see it simply output 3 lines exactly. So I is 1, I is 2, and I is 3. Okay, that's what we have, right? So now let's try to analyze the behavior for this for loop. Okay, what I will do is I will get a copy this particular fragment of Java code, and then I'll move on to iPad. Okay, let me move on to iPad, and then let me paste that code over there. Okay, it's pasting now. Okay, that's a fragment of code we just talked about over here. Let's try to see how to analyze this. Okay, so now, again, this part over here, the first part, this is so-called initialization of your loop counter. Okay, initialization. Okay, and the second part over here, I less than or equal to 3, right? In between the first and second semicolon. So this is so-called state condition. Okay, state. State condition in the sense that as long as this condition here, which is Boolean expression, as long as this Boolean expression is evaluated to true, you're going to keep repeating, executing the body of the for loop, which is over here, right? Okay, and then the third part over here is called is making a progress of the loop, which means the way we're going to make progress is we're going to keep every time after we repeat the body of the for loop, another time we're simply just going to execute this statement over here so that i's value will be changed. So we're hoping that eventually the state condition will just become false. So we don't really try to repeat the action indefinitely, right? Eventually we're going to stop, right? Let's see exactly how we can analyze the behavior over here, and then I will trace them for you manually, and then we'll see that on the debugger, okay? So now this is how you can understand. Initialization is once only. That's why it's called initialization, okay? Only initially. And the state condition will be evaluated. State condition will always be evaluated. And now the progress of the loops over here, let me just say that over here, the progress of loop will be executed at the end of each iteration. Okay, now let's see how we can understand the behavior. Okay, so now let's go for, let me just call it that over here for you. So this is the first part. That's called the initialization. So basically what we will do is we're going to, first of all, that's the flowchart for the program. So we started with executing the initialization. So integer I is reinitialized to 1. So this is what we have initially. And that's only going to be executed once, only once. And then we're going to evaluate the state condition over here to see if we should really enter the loop for the very first time. Should we even go for the very first execution for the body of the loop? Should we ever even repeat once, basically? Okay, what we will do is we're gonna go to a decision point in which we're gonna draw a diamond. So it's gonna be I less than or equal to 3. And it's going to be either true or false. Okay, either true or false. Okay, it's a diamond shape over here. If it is true, okay, it can be either true or it can be false. I'll worry about the false part in a moment. Okay, and if it is true, that means we're going to execute the body of the loop over here, right? So which is going to be as many lines as you like. But for now, this case, just 1 line. So that means we're simply just going to say print line. Okay, let me just write it a little bit better for you. Okay, print line, and then it's going to be I is I, right? Okay, I is I. Okay, and that is the body of the loop. In this case, just 1 line. If there are more than 1 line, you can definitely do more than 1 line. Okay. Okay, so that's it's not perfect. Let me just now try to be a little bit better. Okay, that is the box to be executed for this particular one. Okay, And let me just put them just right touching. Okay, good. So now, after executing every line in the loop body over here, we're going to make sure we execute the progress of the loop. That's why I said execute at the end of each iteration, right? So after this, we're going to execute over here. That's why I'm gonna really write it maybe in a different color, basically like this. Okay, so now we're just going to say I plus plus, and then we're going to just put it over here. Okay, so now let's try to make it touching over here. Okay, that's the one. And now what's going to happen is at the end of the loop, after we try to make a progress updates on the blue one we just said. Oh, by the way, this is another name I forgot to mention. The I over here, which we use inside the loop, is called a loop counter. Okay. And you may have more than one loop counter if you need it, which we'll learn about. That's a little bit more advanced. We'll learn about it, multiple loop counter, a little bit later in the course. Okay, so now after executing the progress of the loop, what we should do is we do not execute the initialization anymore. That's why it's called initialization, only executed once. So what we will do is we will go back over here to the decision point over here. Okay, just to see if we should really execute another time. If it is, we're gonna go for the true part over here and then try to execute another time. And then we'll try to go for another update for the progress, and then we'll go back here and we might go for this pattern over here iteratively, repetitively for as many times as we might need, as long as this particular decision point I is less than or equal to 3 is true. Okay, as soon as it becomes false, that means we should not repeat the loop action anymore. In that case, we'll simply just go for exit from the loop. In that case, I'll draw it like that. It simply just go like this. Okay, it will simply go like this. Okay, this is the false. Okay, this is the true. Okay, let me just highlight the 3 parts that we specified previously. So now you can see this is the initialization executed only once. And this is the state condition over here, which tells us whether or not we're going to repeat the body of the loop. Okay, and then we also got this particular part, which is called the update part for the loop. In this case, it tells us that hopefully I++ can eventually make the orange part, the state condition, eventually false, so that we can exit from the loop. That's the idea. Okay, let's have a look quickly. Okay, so now what I want you to really let's trace the program together. Okay, so now what I will do is let me just put a table over here. Let's say we got a value for I. Okay, and also we got the expression I less than or equal to 3. Okay, that's what we have, right? Let's have a simple trace table over here, right? Okay, so let's see exactly how things will go. Okay, so now let me use the green one to tell you with the execution flow. So we started with this over here. Okay, and then we're going to execute this particular initialization. So that means I will be initialized to be 1. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll simply put 1. So I is initially just 1. And then when we try to evaluate, and then we try to go and then evaluate this particular decision point for the very first time. So now in the case where I is simply just 1. 1 less than or equal to 3, right? I'll put 1 less than or equal to 3 is just going to give me true, right? So that means I'm really going to try to repeat the body of the loop for the very first time. And then I'm going to execute this particular print statement for the first time, right? And now it's going to be I is simply just 1. And then after this, I'm going to, at the end of the loop, I'm going to execute this particular updates, okay, at the end of the loop. And then it's going to be I++. So I++ is going to execute I from 1 to 2. So that means now I becomes 2. And then we actually go back to this particular decision point over here. And now that means we're going to evaluate this condition again. So let me use a different color over here. Let's say orange. Let me say, what about just blue over here? that means we're going to evaluate this particular condition over here for the second time, right? And now that means it's going to be the following. So now I would just be, let me use maybe green over here. So now I would be, let's say 2, right? So now 2 less than or equal to 3 is also still going to give us true, right? So that means we are still going to go into the body of the loop and repeat it for the second time, right? That's true. So that means we're still going to execute this particular block of code at the same time. And now the I value will just be 2, right? So that means we're going to print out I is 2, as we saw in the Eclipse. And then we're just going to execute this particular part of the updates, right? It's just over here. Remember, this part over here is going to be executed at the end of the repetition for the body of the loop. At the end is implicit, so you should always remember that one should be executed at the end. And then, so what we have over here is I will be incremented from 2 to 3. So that means over here is going to be incremented from 2 to 3. So now the current value for that is 3. So now that means we'll go back to over here, okay? And then we're going to evaluate the diamond condition again, the state condition. Let me just use another one. Let's say this time we're going to evaluate this condition for the third time over here. So what's the value for I at the moment? We know at the moment the I's value is simply just 3. Okay, it's 3. So now that means we're going to say 3 less than or equal to 3. And it is still just true. Agree? It's still true. That means we should still go ahead to repeat the body of the loop for the third time. So now let's do that. Okay, so now we're still going to go into the if branch over here, and then we're still going to execute this same block of code, just one line, for the third time. And then we know for the moment I is simply just 3, right, as we said before. And then we're going to also, at the end, we're also going to execute this progress part for the loop. And then we're going to execute this part over here, I++, which will go from 3 to 4. Okay, now here comes the very critical part. From 3 to 4, so now that means we got 4 over here. And then right after that progress updates, we're going to go into checking this particular state condition once more. So now, this is the 4th time we are trying to check it. The first time, the second time, and the third time we check it, it simply return true. That is why we have so far executed the body of the loop 3 times. That's why. Now, will the 4th time succeed or not? If evaluated true, that means we're going to execute the body of the loop for the 4th time. Otherwise, we stop here. Okay? That's why it is really important that you always include the state condition over here and also some progress update part, so you don't have an infinite loop. Okay? So now what we have is for the 4th time. So now you can see this is 4 over here. Now, so that means, let me use a different color. What about just orange? So it's 4 over here. So now 4 less than or equal to 3, right? You can see I is simply just 4. It's going to give me false. So you can see all the previous evaluation for the same expression over here was true. That's why I got 3 repetitions of the body of the loop so far. But now the 4th time is simply just false. That means now I'm not going to actually execute the print line anymore. I'm simply just going to go into this branch over here, which is false, and then I will terminate the program. Okay, that's how we trace the program over here. Let me recap. That's something very important. Okay, again, you can see that this guy over here is called a state condition. And then you can see that when the state condition is true, when it is true, that means we can go ahead and go into the body of the loop and repeat the body of the loop over here, right? However, in order to make sure we don't have an infinite loop, which means we don't really want to repeat the body of the loop indefinitely, that's not something we want to do. It's going to consume exhaustively all the resources of your computer. So that is why you should always remember to include a part that is just going to update the loop counter so that eventually the expression for the state condition will just be falsified eventually. Okay, so now you can see that exactly after 3 repetitions in the 4th, right before the 4th iteration, we see that the value for the state condition just become false. That means now it is time that we stop the repetition and exit from the loop and then terminate the program. Okay, it's something very important for you to understand for the for loop. Okay, again, you should really understand the initialization, understand the state condition, understand the updates which will be executed at the end of the loop. Okay, and now you should also try to get yourself comfortable with this particular flowchart, which I hope will really help you understand. And also, should know that for the state condition over here, as soon as it becomes false, that means you should stop the loop. As long as it's still true, that means you can execute the body of the loop. Okay, execute the body of the loop. Okay, and as soon as it becomes false, that means exit from the loop. Okay, it's really critical for you to see the anatomy of the loop. Okay, hopefully you see that. So now let's see this very quickly in the debugger for you to see, apply your prior knowledge about debugger. So what I would do is, let me simply just go to over here. So I'm gonna put a breakpoint over here. So right beside line number 9, I'm gonna put a breakpoint here. Double click, and then you'll see the blue point over here, right? That's a breakpoint. And now I want to see exactly how these 1, 2, 3, 4 have occurred, right? Let's go very carefully, okay? So now let me assume that you're reasonably familiar with this diagram over here and also this table here. If you're not, please rewatch the recording again before you try to go on, okay? So now let me just do it now. So now what I would do is I can right click on the for loop .java, and then I can say debug as Java application. Okay, so now if I go to variables, again, if you don't see either variables or expressions, you can easily find them out. Go to window and show view, and then you can see the variables over here, and also you can see the expressions here. Okay, you can easily find them out, even if they disappear for some reason. Okay, so now we are pausing at line number 9 right before we try to evaluate the header of the loop. Oh, by the way, there's something I forgot to write it down for you. So over here, let me use maybe a different color. What about red? So basically, the first part, and second part, and the third part, all the parts together is called the header of the loop. Basically, when you have a for loop over here, something, semicolon, something, semicolon, something, all the 3 parts together is called the header of the for loop. Okay, that's something for you to know as well. It's a very common terminology. Okay, so now let's see this. So now at the moment, let's see what's going to happen. So let's say we want to step over. As soon as it say step over, it's going to execute the initialization part, okay, which is going to initialize I to be 1. And also it's going to evaluate the state condition for the very first time. So what do we expect to see? So now we expect to see I should be initialized to be 1 over here, and also evaluating 1 less than 3, less than or equal to 3 is going to be true. So that means we should really go into this particular body of the loop for the first time, right? So now if I simply say step over, you can see that we go there for the first time, right? So now if you look at I over here, I is simply just 1, okay? And now in the expressions over here, I can delete all the previous ones. I can right click and say remove all. Okay, so over here I can put expression I, and also I can put the state condition over here. I can simply type I less than or equal to 3. It is true, that means we enter there for the first time, right? So now if you say step over, it's going to execute for the first time, right? The body of the loop for the first time. Now if you look at the variables over here, the I's value is still 1. So now if we try to execute the header of the loop the second time, right? So that means we're going to basically execute the progress part for the loop. That means I++ will be executed, and also at the same time we're just going to evaluate I less than or equal to 3 for the second time, because we know that I++ will go from 1 to 2, and then 2 less than or equal to 3 is going to give you true. That means we're still going to loop for the second time. Okay, it's going to do several things at a time. Okay, so now let's see this. I want you to look at the expressions over here, right? You can see at the moment I is 1 and I less than or equal to 3 is true. As soon as I say step over, you can see I has become 2 over here, but I less than or equal to 3 is still true. That means I still go into the loop for the second time. Okay, So now I'm still going to the loop for the second time. So now that means I go into loop, executing the print line over here. Okay, and then I say step over, and then I is equal to 2 over here, right? So now when I try to execute the header for the third time, right? That means I'm gonna do I++ over here, do I++, which will go from 2 to 3. And then I'm going to also evaluate I less than or equal to 3, which is going to be true again. So that means I'm going to go into the loop for the third time. Okay, so now if I simply say step over, okay, so now you can see that for the expressions over here, how now I has become 3. Okay, and the conditions still remain to be true. Okay, finally, after we repeat the body of the loop for the third time, so you can see the third line printed out here. Okay, so now finally, what should we see? We're going to execute this particular progress part, which is going to increment I from 3 to 4. And then we're going to go back to the diamond state condition over here, which will be 4 less than or equal to 3, in which case it's going to give us false. In that case, we're going to exit from the loop. That's exactly what you will see. Okay, so now if I say step over, notice that it's not going to go into the body of the loop at line number 11 anymore. If I say step over, it will simply go outside, exit from the loop and go line number 13. That means we only print out these 3 lines. Okay, hopefully that makes sense to you, right? That's exactly how we can do for the for loop. Okay, so now let's say let me just pause, stop over here for this video. What I would like you to do before you go on to the next video, make sure for this simplest program over here, understand exactly what you should put for the first part, which is just initialization. Okay, second part, which must be a Boolean expression for as long as it is true, it's going to stay in the loop for repeating the action. As soon as it becomes false, you're going to exit from the loop with no further repetition. And then the third part is just going to update the loop counter so that eventually the state condition will be falsified. So you will exit from the loop. You don't have infinite loop. And also make sure you make yourself comfortable with the flowchart over here, and also the tabular, like how you trace the code using a table. It's really important for you to know, number 1, flowchart. Number 2, the table. And number 3, how to use the debugger, like what I'm doing now. Okay, so now you can stop the debugger, and then we'll show you a little bit more application about user input and output using for loop in the next video.